Welcome to Bridging Gaps, the business podcast sharing the challenges and stories of fellow business owners.
Hello, I'm Deborah Levitt, your host, and this week I'm in conversation with Dr. Arpinder Bansi of Core Value Associates Limited. Arpinder and I met at the St. Pancras Renaissance Hotel up in London, and we had a really good conversation. It was quite wide-ranging, but we talked a lot about limiting beliefs and unconscious bias and how all of these things actually not only impact the work that Arpinder is doing, but also how they come into our daily lives and how they're impacting a lot of the changes that we're trying to affect in the world today. So the changes about, gender gaps and equality and diversity, and how all of the things that have gone on in our history impact where we are today and how we manage to move forward. So please join me now in welcoming Arpinder. So hello and welcome. I'm here with Arpinder Bansi, and we are at the St. Pancras Renaissance Hotel because we decided, having had some technical problems last time, that face-to-face was going to be a much better environment. So you might hear a bit of a buzz around us. We've also got the lovely Woody with us, who is doing his best to stop everybody going by to make sure that he gets fussed. Hello, Arpinder. How are you?
Hi, Deborah. I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And really nice to see you face-to-face and have a chat. Yeah. So you want to tell us a little bit about what Core Values is and why Core Values?
Okay. So when I set up my business, the foundations of the business is I want to help people to really realise their potential. Because so many times people limit themselves and they start doubting their performance, and I want them to align with their core values. And core just happens to be my middle name. All Sikh women have core as a middle name, and I just thought it was a nice pun. Yes,
I didn't know that.
So we recognise Sikh because all women will have core as a middle name, and all men will have Singh as a middle name.
Okay. I had no idea. So everybody who's Sikh or female has core values.
Well, hopefully every human has core values.
I'm not sure about that.
Yes.
So you were saying that it took you 8 weeks, though, to reach the conclusion that Core Values was the name.
It was like with any new startup, when you're thinking of a name, I wanted to combine some of who I was and what I believe in, but also what I want, how I want to help other people, what I want to do with it. And to me, it's all about unlimited potential. And because I believe that we all got unlimited potential, and the only thing that sometimes stops us performing is when people start questioning us and challenging us, and we start doubting ourselves. And actually, if we're true to our own core values, what we believe is right, what we believe is true, what makes us as a person, we will find the right answers. And I wanted people who were unhappy in their careers to think about, what do you really want? What are your triggers? If you're not happy, then there's a misalignment that what you value and what the organisation is asking, or the way you're working, and it's bringing that back to the person you're meant to be.
So are you working with individuals to help them to come to that conclusion, or are you working with the company itself?
I work with a whole range of clients. So I work with people on a one-to-one basis. I work with teams and departments within organisations, and I also deliver programs for FTSE companies, public sector, etc. So it's a whole range
of different people. And is it a different approach for every one of those situations?
It depends what you mean by approach, because my bag is unconscious bias.
Okay.
So, and with unconscious bias, it's about eliminating assumptions that you have. So even when I'm doing leadership workshops, there's the thread of that challenging, because it's a facilitated workshop. So where are those assumptions coming from that has driven the statement that you've just said?
Right.
And it's challenging that, and it's very sort of coaching style, even in the leadership workshops, which obviously the coaching will be the one-to-one anyway.
So in a leadership workshop, if you've got a number of different people there and you're doing that challenging, how are you, I guess, dealing with the possible sensitivities that somebody might have if they're being challenged, or are they challenging each other?
So with all the leadership workshops we do, and obviously you have to adapt to the audience, because some of the delegates will be graduates level who are being accelerated into leadership. Other workshops might be board level directors who've got like 20 years experience plus each.
Yes.
So it's obviously you've got to adapt, but it's managing expectations at the outset. So I'm very upfront and say that we all know why we want to be here, but what behaviours do you want so you can maximise your own learning objectives? And it's about really contracting that. So people say, yeah, we're going to be open and honest and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And I said, no, it's got to be written on the board, and you're all responsible for challenging if you don't see those behaviours happening. Because it's not about me telling you, it's a level playing field. You're in the room, it's your session. So it's what you take out of it. So
from the beginning, you are facilitating, and
Yes.
you're giving them that control and that responsibility, rather than them just expecting to sit back and occasionally stick their hand up and answer a question.
if they wanted that, I will give them a textbook to read.
Read that, wake me up when you get to a question.
It's not about anybody knowing any more than anybody else. It's about, we are individuals. As individuals, we have our own perspective on things, and the best conversations, the innovation, creativity happens when people can have that healthy conflicting conversation to challenge each other, and new things are then to be thought about and creative, and that's how ideas happen. If we're all being too polite or not discussing it and then festering,
Yes.
nothing changes.
And everybody just continues down those different paths.
And then they're unhappy, then they don't want to do their job, and then it's, I want a change in career plan, can you coach me? And
I remember, because this is a few years ago now, I was working with a German colleague, so he was a supplier to a project that we were working on, and it was the first time for me, which is, I think, quite amazing in my view, that it'd take me this long to get to a point of having this type of relationship with somebody. But he was the first person that I could have an argument with and still thought, we were very good friends, and we would have these, very intense arguments and discussions. And it was quite a revelation for me that actually I can still be.
that was a really healthy relationship. And that's about the challenge in that safe environment. I can say things without being judged, or is this going to land wrong, or are they going to misunderstand me? And
exactly, and not doubting yourself, and therefore, as you say, holding it in, letting it fester, all of those types of things.
Brilliant.
So, as you mentioned before, you've got an engineering background,
That's correct.
but engineering itself wasn't somewhere that as a child was a natural place for you to progress. If I remember correctly, this is something that was a bit of a battle.
The reason I got into engineering, because I know we've shared this, but it makes sense if I start from the beginning.
No, absolutely.
So, when I was at school, I went to a local comprehensive school, and in the area where I grew up, it was sort of expected that people in that area, you're going to be working in factories, and for women it's like sewing factories, etc. And at one of the parents' evenings, my parents were told, you're wasting your time with asking about how I'm progressing, because my outlook is she'll be working in a sewing factory. And my dad was very much that, no, I want her to do, because she's got potential, I want her to explore that potential. And the teacher said, well, if she works hard, she could work in a typing pool. And to be fair, when I hear this story, people say, how can the teacher say that? And I said, well, the teacher can, because I remember this teacher, she was very close to retirement. And from her perspective, she must have seen a lot of children from this area with this potential and not been given that opportunity and being forced to leave school at 16, because it's about, earning some money, putting food on the table, contributing to the family's financial situation. So when my dad said no, I want something different, we more or less had to sort it ourselves out. And the careers advice wasn't brilliant. I knew I wanted to go to university, and I found out that PhD was the highest degree you can actually work for. So I thought that's where I set my goal. And I was brought up, if you really want to do something, then do it. It might be hard, but only you. If you stop, then it's your own fault, kind of thing. So my parents were really like, if you want to do it, do it. If you don't blame anybody else. So I did my PhD, and I did my degree in engineering because, with the lack of careers advice, I didn't know what I could do with a maths degree or a physics degree, and that's what I really love. Those are the subjects I really love. So I did the engineering degree, went to university, and because I wanted to be a lecturer, I thought I'll go out and get some practical experience. And I stayed in the industry for over 20 years. And in that time, because I sort of progressed from graduate to senior levels, there came a point where sort of the board around me was saying there aren't many women in senior positions. Why is that? And we set up a diversity steering group and a working party to explore. And because I was involved with that, when I then discovered some of the challenges that this isn't about getting women into STEM, because we were getting female graduates, but why weren't they in senior levels? And it was about what's often termed as the leaky pipeline. The talent was just leaving. And the myth was, oh, they're leaving because they want to look after their families. The reality was they were leaving because they had enough. And they weren't coming back into their careers. And all this research is done by PwC, by McKinsey. It's been in the public domain for a very long time. Organisations were enacting on it. Putting that to one side, because of the experience that women were having, they were also doubting themselves. And that's when I trained up to be a coach, to say, well, no, why are you doubting yourself? Where's that come from? Let's go back to why you started this. And by being able to coach them, and I say professionally because I've now got a coaching accreditation, it opened up new doors. And I thought, knowing what I now know about the barriers are in organisation and the buzz I get from helping these women, I'll set up my own business. So that's how it all happened. So from engineering, so as much as I love the problem solving, the number challenge, everything, seeing somebody suddenly grow in front of you, coaches understand you can't describe it, because suddenly the burden has fallen to the wayside and they actually got that spark back again, and they're looking forward to the next challenge, and that's what it's all about.
And it's amazing when you see somebody, as you say, that transformation of now they can see the potential. So for you, did you find that background of a childhood where you had been slotted into, this is what happens, these are your options, if you're doing really well, the typing pool is the pinnacle of your success. Did you find that with your parents supporting you, were there other people around you supporting you as well, or was it really just a battle?
So several things. That if I had my time again, I now know a whole range of career options which I didn't have. My parents were very supportive, but it was about practicalities, which is why we thought engineering, because I love maths and physics, or engineering. With engineering degree, you become an engineer. Though that was it, the support, because the school was like, okay, but there's been a stigma about girls can't do maths. So I had that stigma at school, and I remember doing a competition, and because I went to a mixed school, and it was an external competition, all the schools did it, and I got highly commended. So basically, it was like these rounds and things, and you scored a point. They sent out these questions, and you had like 2 weeks to return the solution, and it was several rounds. It took over a period of months. And I got highly commended, and my teacher, who happened to be a female teacher, was beside herself because they referred to me as a male student. And she goes, "Can't women do maths? Why have they automatically assumed you're a guy?" And anyway, and that was, because I never thought twice about it. I just thought maths is maths. So we got that from people not accepting women in maths, and then from the community, it was like, don't educate your girl, the woman's place is in the home. You'll never get her married. she's, she'll be too smart. Nobody wants a wife who's more qualified or educated than they are. And they were like, this is a bad thing. So my parents, they shielded me from that, but they had a lot of stick. And now nobody bats an eyelid about girls going to university and what have you.
I know, exactly. Yeah. It is such a transformation. Because one of the things that I've noticed, and when I first came over here, is that there does seem to be a general barrier to maths over here. And that I would meet people, women, I think as well as men, but women more so, who were just, it was like a shutter came down. As soon as you mentioned math, it was, I can't do that.
Yes.
And it's interesting to hear sort of your background, is that that's what they were being taught, was essentially, you can't do math, you're a woman, you can't do it.
It's interesting, I'm just so like the one, because I've been brought up in a family where people think Asians are good at maths, yet the school, women can't do maths. So who do I listen to?
That's right. I'm an Asian, but I'm a woman. I can only do it on Wednesdays.
Yes, exactly. But having said that, there was I've got two daughters. I remember on my eldest one, there was a period where I think she was in year 6. Her maths mark dropped in the class, and when the teachers investigated, the head teacher investigated, she happened to be taught by a teacher who believed that girls couldn't do maths because the whole class marks had dropped. And there is this stigma in the UK. And when I've gone around, because I do talks in Europe as well, when I did a talk for Microsoft a few years back, I pulled out statistics about girls in STEM. And it surprised me how far the UK lagged behind Italy, France, Netherlands, Finland. And they all thought the UK would be further ahead because we talk a good talk. Because South Italy is very much, I see it like an Asian culture where they were saying the expectation for girls is still to be your places in the home. And then in UK, they thought that UK, the girls can do any career they want. But the barriers are there, and it's, one of the, when I get on my high horse, it's about the lack of role models. If we had more visible role models, then that would help take away some of the barriers, because people don't see the women there, and that reinforces, maybe women can't do this, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And do you think that's shifting at all? Do you think that we are starting to get those role models, or are we still in a situation where actually there's very few and far between? Because the only ones I can think of, and this, I should probably be embarrassed, is Carol Vorderman. And now there's a replacement for her whose name I have no clue of. But are there people who are visible that girls are starting to see, actually this is possible, I can do this?
So there's a number of things that happen. There's women who do succeed, but they succeed through stealth. So they see because their passion is so strong. And it's also, with all different personalities as well, and or they've had a sponsor or whatever, and they've got to where they are. And if they think they've got there on their own, they don't see the problem for other women. So,
yes.
And which is acceptable, because you only know what you know.
Exactly.
So they think, well, if I can do it and I've had to overcome these challenges, then surely somebody else can do it. Because they don't put themselves on a pedestal. They still see, well,
it was
I'm
just
like
natural.
everybody else.
Yes.
Yeah. Then you get the men see, well, these women have done it, so why can't the next woman? But people talk about the glass ceilings, but nobody talks about the sticky floors. Have you heard about sticky floors?
I haven't, no.
So the sticky floor syndrome is that we'll progress in the organisation and say graduates come in and they come on a level salary. And then within grades you get bonuses, etc. You start to see a discrepancy in the salary. So, and this is why we got the gender pay discrepancy. Mm-hmm. So when you then go for your next promotion, you've already got discrepancy. Worse, when you go for your next job, they ask you, what's your last salary? So over time, the pay gap widens. And until that pay gap discrepancy is addressed, we will always have a problem.
So why does in that initial period, so we've come in level, why are women not moving up as high or at the same level as men?
Well, let me ask you, who's responsible for the dishing out of the bonuses?
Often it'll be men.
So
is this an unconscious bias?
They're still keeping women in their place. And if the woman then challenges it too much, what's going to happen? She's the troublemaker. And the words are associated across the genders. See, men are assertive and strong. Women are arrogant, troublemaker. Why can't they be happy?
It is really interesting, isn't it, how the same behavior in a woman compared to a man can get a completely different reaction. And sometimes I know that this happens, within the same gender, that the same behavior from one person compared to another gets a different reaction. But it does make it very difficult.
And the other thing in this country, when at the turn of the century, when men were getting degrees, the suffragettes had to really fight hard to have access to education. And even the churches had leaflets that they were distributing to say women should not be taught what was referred to as masculine subjects, which was the science and the maths. And they actually, you can research this yourself, they actually said if they study these subjects, it will have an adverse impact on their childbearing capacity. So it was scaremongering.
Wow.
And we are still trying to address a legacy of generations previous. And then you've got supply and demand, the job scarcity, who's the best person for the job. And then it's in the playground, the boys are taught to be competitive. It's the winner takes all. So all these behaviours, the conditioning and everything has an impact. So in the UK, you can audit the whole process. Although we've come a long way, we haven't. And when people say, I've got here on my own notes, I say yes, but the suffragettes opened the doors. And the lecturers who got, there were riots. Lecturers from Cambridge University used to get beaten up for teaching women. And it's this legacy. And what I find surprising is, we talk about gender parity, but in the academic world, the hardest challenge is for women to get a professorship because of unconscious bias than any other profession. Talk about women in law, women in finance, women in engineering. Things are happening. But the slowest movement is in universities. The challenges women get to get professorship, I was absolutely gobsmacked.
And why is that? Do you know, or is it?
I don't know. Is it the old men's club? Is it?
Yeah.
Because professorship, the whole system works differently, and it's this adage say, if it's not broke, don't try and fix it. So, but who's saying it's not broke?
Yeah.
Who's saying it's broken? Who wants to fix it? And it's become some of that. But I'm concentrating on the women in businesses and the women in engineering.
No, that's fine, because I think that there's elements, male or female, so we know there's obviously a disparity between women and their ability to progress because of all sorts of things that you've talked about. But I know I was talking to somebody recently, and what she said to me was that she was fairly sure that the reason she had done so well in her career was because she smoked. And what she realized was that when she started smoking, she would, as everybody else does who smokes, is that they would go outside and smoke.
Yes.
And so, of course, it was this huge leveler, because it didn't matter what level you were in the organization, you went outside and smoked.
Exactly.
So she became visible to people who probably had never seen her before, and she directly links those two things. The fact that she had now become, I guess, known and familiar. It wasn't necessarily that she was any better than anybody else, and it wasn't the fact that she actually smoked.
But she could develop that relationship, and it was person to person.
Exactly.
So you see, because I used to get this in my career, that people will talk about Indians and women and then forget I'm Indian and I'm a woman, because I was accepted.
You were just
team.
you, yes.
Because we'd gone past that forming a relationship. But when you don't know people, the unconscious bias creeps in. It's that in-group. But she's absolutely right. It's about networking.
Yeah, exactly. So have you found that having had that challenging you were supposed to go into this particular slot. You and your parents said, no, I'm refusing to go into that. So you went off down this other road, have been very successful in terms of the engineering career, of moving into the coaching and now helping to other people. Are you finding that all of those experiences come into helping people? Do you find that people are still experiencing some of those, those same challenges and limitations that you've had when you were a child? Or is it moving on, even if it's not quite there yet?
It's because they're experiencing the same challenges is what's prompted me to come out of engineering. And what I find, because I'm still learning, so when I'm having coaching conversations, what people now bring to the table, I actually feel quite blessed because I never had the challenges that they had.
Okay.
Some of the things that have happened in their sort of working lives. And so maybe because I was so task-oriented, I got the job done and I got the relationship and I just, railroaded forwards and didn't see what was behind me. It's only because I've stopped now, and now I'm looking at these other people and they share their stories, and I find it quite sad, to be honest. So I'm doing my bit, but I find it quite sad that we've evolved, but we haven't evolved.
And I agree, and I think it's very sad when we look at some of the ways that we have evolved. But I also look at it sometimes, and I think that, is it surprising? Because in some ways, if you look at the normal the normal business working world, it was all initially defined by men.
Yes.
And so, of course, what's happening is that women coming into it are trying to exist and be successful in a masculine environment, and therefore potentially behaving in ways that aren't natural to them as a woman, rather than, I guess, celebrating the strengths and the things that we bring as women. Because, let's face it, there are things that, some things some men are better at, some women are better at, we all overlap. Yeah. But recognizing some of those strengths and abilities and going, actually, I can be successful by being me. Exactly. And I think until we start doing that, those barriers are going to stay there.
It's one of these, because there's a lot of statistics out there that diverse teams perform better than non-diverse teams, and that's by women being themselves and not being men. And it's one of these that we need to get to that critical mass. So initially, when women were going to universities, they were getting diplomas, they weren't allowed to graduate. Now fast forward to women going to universities, nobody bats an eyelid if they're graduating because we've gone past that critical mass. Women to be teachers, now nobody bats an eyelid. Women to be doctors. I mean, we're in this lovely Renaissance Hotel, but just up the road, there's a building that's dedicated to the first female doctor. Only she wasn't allowed to call herself a doctor because she wasn't allowed to practice. She did the qualification, but she wasn't allowed to practice because female doctors weren't allowed. But look at where we are now. So it's this slow and steady progress, and we all have a responsibility. And what we're trying to do is not change who we are, but we want to open up to new ideas and thoughts and challenge what elements have been conditioned because the textbooks haven't changed.
Yes.
And what elements, well, actually, we need to be different now because the world is changing, organisations are changing. But it's that slow, which is why we need the role models, and we need people challenge. People say, actually, it's work, so I'm going to step up, and it encourages other women, etc. And it's not just engineering. Even with I'm reading something that it was a piece of Google research that if women and men apply for, say, for example, business grants and loans, the woman is twice as likely to get rejected. Now, why is that? She's got a business idea, etc. It's all these, and it's a lot of it is unconscious bias. But when you're challenged and people think about it, we're addressing it. So,
and I think that's the main thing, is that if we're looking at it and we're addressing it and we're trying to find ways around it, and we're accepting that, for me anyway, this is my view, is I think that there are some things that will take time, that you can tell somebody to be different, but telling them doesn't mean that they are. And so it's accepting that some of these things are going to evolve over time, and that, you know, the next generation coming up, if they're getting the messages, then it's going to start to...
Exactly. We're all linked. It's not going to happen in a lifetime. It's this continued change and challenging yourself. And you know, you said the words telling them, and telling them they've got to discover for themselves.
Exactly.
And it's that discussion, and then they will influence other people around them, will influence other people. So, you know, we have our light bulbs moment through different conversations, but that's how the change is going to happen.
And it's coming to that conclusion yourself when you've kind of assimilated all of the information around you.
And the thing is, when we talk about women in the workplace, and they say, that women are part-timers because they're looking after children, and I'm thinking, well, I know guys who want to be part-timers because they want to do their hobbies, or they want to do this, or they want to be the stay-at-home parent. So it's about, we've got to change the way we work, that as long as we meet the outputs, we're not doing micromanagement. And it all comes back to, how do we deal with people? And the interesting thing for me is that managers, when they leave the door of their office, they become lovely people. But in the workplace, they become these difficult people, and it's all about people.
But is it also about the fact that if you're in an organization of, I don't know if it's of any size, but of a certain size at least, that there is this drive, and your success as a manager is measured sometimes on your productivity, on the output, on the sales, you know, whatever it is.
Which is the legacy of how organizations have run.
Yes.
And that's what's slowing down the change. Because managers, so somebody, you know, come in an organization and they want to get promoted, they will learn the behaviors of their managers, and they'll see what works, and we pick up behaviors without realizing it. We pick up their language, etc.
Well, and that's how you get the message as well, though, is if your manager is successful, then, or is perceived as successful, then, as you say, you pick up those behaviors, you start to think, okay, that's what a successful manager should look like. And even if you make little changes, they're unlikely to be a dramatic difference, isn't it?
And when I talk with female lawyers, and again, I meet some of them, they've just got married, but they put off having a family because they want to get that associate director level, because if they have a career break too early, they perceive it difficult to get back on the career ladder. So they want to establish that position, then have the career break, and then come back and still be respected for that position. And that shouldn't be the way.
No, it shouldn't. It should be, you know, well, we all know, I guess, that, you know, you should be respected for what you do.
But they have to work the long hours to get that position. So it's all work. And this is again, so they're seeing the managers before them, and that's what's worked, and no one's challenging it. Is there another way we can do this for men and women, not just, you know, everybody benefits?
Well, exactly. It is that I remember quite a few years ago now, actually, that there was a colleague of mine, and he was based in the States, and I remember we were typing on some sort of instant chat, whatever it was, and he was like, I've done this many hours this week, and I was like, I've done this many, and I can remember sitting back and thinking, why do I want to win this competition? Why do I want to be the one who's worked the hardest?
We get influenced by our surroundings.
Yeah, exactly. And that year, actually, I remember at the end of the year looking back, and I thought, what have you done? That I've worked, and I could have looked, I think, no, you've worked, and you've worked, and you've worked. And I don't want that to be what the rest of, you know, the future. But we get so caught up in that competitiveness of, I did 60 and I did 80, and
everybody around you's doing it.
Yeah, that's it.
We pick up that energy.
And then stepping back and going, actually, do you know what? I don't want to be that person. I'm happy to do.
When you step back, everybody's saying, why are you stepping back?
Yeah.
And
that's the hard part as well, because then it's also not just why are you stepping back, but why aren't you willing to put the hours in? You know, whether it's lazy, whether it's not committed, you know, whatever words
they're not
they
having
use.
a conversation.
Yeah, it's actually, and so then you don't feel that you can step back necessarily. It's as you can tell, I find this very interesting. So let's go back to you, though. So we've talked about core values. We've talked about how you help with people. One of the things that's come out that you didn't really specify, though, is that you also do a lot of research.
Okay. So because the way the business is set up, it works in 3 parts. So I do the leadership development and I do coaching programs. But the third part is the research bit, because of what I now know about unconscious bias and how the consequences of it in the workplace. I'm still learning, and there's always new information because the world is changing, be it slowly, and it's picking up research. What's best practice in another part of the world? How do we do that? What are the challenges? Just doing a temperature check. So what's happening in organisations today? So, we're doing all this work with women. What about BAME? What about sort of ethnic minorities? LGBT's gathering momentum. But what about people who've got disabilities? And
Yes.
It's about tapping into people's potential. And even to get to an interview can be a challenge. But why is that the case? We want to do the research. So what have we learned from Open Doors for Women that we can apply to some of the other diversity strands? And it's that sort of stuff. It's all about, I suppose the legacy I want to leave behind is, have I done my bit making this a better world for my children and my children's children? What have I contributed to improve things? And I can only do that by having conversations with people who then have other conversations and challenging the thinking in the way my own thinking's been challenged.
And have you found that your thinking has changed? Have you, because as you said before, that when you're successful in your own right, you don't necessarily understand the challenges that other people have gone through. So through the research, through the different people that you're meeting, are your ideas in that evolving? Okay.
My own views of, because they've been challenged and because I'm learning, I've gone on a whole journey and I'm still on this journey. So if I think back to when I was like as an engineer, I'll be honest with you, I was very task orientated. It was like, well, why can't you do it? All you could do is X, Y, Z. The emotional side was, just do it. And then, with people having conversations, I'd be like, just do the job. Now I see the other side of it and I see the benefits, and I'm thinking, gosh, there's more than one way. It's because we were conditioned. When you're in something, you can't see it. When you come out of it and you get the bird's eye view, you see everything that's going on. And there's a piece of work done by another leadership guy, and he talks about the system element, the system lens. He talks about that as the managers, because you're so caught up, you don't get time to step back because stuff's coming from the top. Hit these targets, and the people below you, what's going on? Communication isn't working. What's my role? What's this? Why hasn't this worked? What, another change initiative? And you're like, just do what you're asked and hit the targets. But what they don't realise is that they're caught up in the system. So and what happens is stress, anxiety, things set in. They're working the long hours because they spend the day managing the people, and then the after work hours doing what they should have done in the day, which they couldn't do because they're managing the people. We've got to stop that. And we can only stop that by people recognising, right, this is the system, I need to step out. Is there another way? So this work's done like paradoxical leadership. So if I want to do this and this, how can I do that? If we don't change the way we work, we will carry on getting the same results. So the research is into, so what can we change? How can we change? Sometimes it's radical thinking, sometimes it's baby steps, but going into organisations as well and thinking, okay, here's a new way of doing something, and we're getting better results, and people are getting more downtime.
And is it about not just, and this is a genuine question, not just about changing the way that you do it, but changing the expectation about what can be done and what can be achieved? So
I think it's pretty much that if the managers believe that the people in the organisation can do the job, don't micromanage them.
True.
But because their head is, on the chopping block, if this goes wrong, it's your performance.
And you don't get your
fear
bonus.
Of not performing. But
Yeah.
if the whole organisation, because I talk to the senior board, senior management teams who are very strategic level and they're almost in their ivory towers, and this is what we want to do. But when it comes down to the operational level, what they're saying and the culture doesn't align. Because what they're saying is, we're very open, we value diversity and we value our people. And at the operational, if you don't hit these financial figures, what are the managers supposed to do?
Well, exactly. Because if you're getting that pressure, you start to worry about your job, you start to worry about your bonuses. I remember being in one contract once, and we all knew that one of the things that we were working on that was a top priority was a top priority because our manager got his bonus based on that. It wasn't a top priority to the company overall.
Yeah.
It was his bonus, and so we knew that was why it had to. And you just think, well, that's got to be wrong.
And what was the morale like for the people?
Well, exactly. It was not great because we also were getting pressures on other things, and it was like, no, that had to be your main focus. And so I'm going to take you back to core values for a moment. And what I'd just like to know is when you stepped out of being an engineer, you decided to set up your own village, your own business. You'd spent 8 weeks and you'd come up with the perfect name. How did it go from there? Did you find that there were challenges, that there were, ups and downs of running your own business that maybe you hadn't expected when you transitioned from being in that corporate environment?
So when I was doing my coaching diploma, the whole reason why I set out getting the qualification, because I was already mentoring in the workplace, and I was meeting a lot of women who their confidence was wavering and the self-esteem was being attacked because, these were bright women. They'd got so far, but they were worn down. And I saw a need, because the conversations we were having is for them to remember their strengths, align to their values. Why were they doing this? What were they good at? Why were they listening to this? What was the evidence for that? And really unpicking their limiting beliefs. Why does it even exist? Because it doesn't exist. And so when I set out, it was about aligning people back to their values and belief systems to make them stronger. When I actually started the business, it was that whole learning curve, because I've always spent my time in corporate. It's a whole learning curve that although this is the benefit to them, how do you package that up? And it was that packaging and that selling. Once people on the program, they loved it. And they were like, we want more. But getting them on the program, because there's a lot of coaches out there, it was a bit of a learning curve for me that I had to almost package it at an operational level. So, do you want your next promotion? What's holding you back? As opposed to, you can be incredible. Why listen to others? You've got unlimited potential. In a language that would appeal to them. And then once that was happened, we talked about the stuff that really mattered to them. So that was a bit of a learning curve. And then people talked about networking, etc., which is great, but I don't get excited going to a network meeting at 7 a.m. in the morning.
I don't get excited doing much at 7 a.m. in the morning.
But it was like, okay, what about interesting? I went to these networking meetings. The unconscious bias behaviours I saw in corporate world are also in the networking meetings. And the way business was done and who referred businesses to who. And I thought, and a lot of women who wanted to attend, they're doing school runs or they're doing something else. And a lot of women who are starting a business part-time because they still have to fund the business. I thought, this isn't working for them. And it was like, we've got to change this. So again, there were these challenges. How do I reach out to my customers when the traditional business ways was the way the men do it? And, my typical customer would be the female. And they're not going to be at the networking event, so how do I reach out? And social media is great, so that's changed, so it's using that. It was all learning, and each year the business has evolved because I've learned something new, what's worked and what hasn't worked. And you get a book, and a book will say, always do this, and you do it. And when it becomes a choice, then this is not what I've set out to do. And then it was rewinding back and going.
And it is something that I say to people when I'm working with them, if they're feeling overwhelmed and are trying to get back under control, is look at the musts and look at the shoulds. And the must, there's a real reaction or outcome if you don't do it. So if you don't do your taxes and you don't pay the tax man, there is a repercussion, and you're going to get billed, you're going to have problems, all of that. So that is a must. You absolutely must do it. If you don't update your website, then that's probably a should, because are you getting business already?
How do people know you exist?
Yeah, well, no, but it might be that you already have a website, that you're already getting business, that life is actually pretty good, but somebody's told you about some new wonderful thing, so you feel that you have to update your website. But the question is, well, do you have to do that? What happens if you don't? Well, I've already got enough customers. I don't need any more. So that becomes a should. So it depends on the situation, obviously, but it's really asking those questions around what do you absolutely have to do versus what should I do to try and, I guess, alleviate some of those pressures. And
the other thing is, and I'll share this with you, that when I started my business, I wanted to go in a direction, but work came in from a different direction. And it was so easy. Oh, I like this, because I was generating revenue.
Exactly.
And then it was like, I'm not enjoying it anymore. And the reason I wasn't enjoying it is because I wanted to go in this direction, and I allowed myself to do that, and it was actually being strong enough to say no. And now I only do what I love to do, and it's working. But it's having that confidence, because when no income's coming in, you think,
well, and it comes back to that should again as well, as I should take it because it's money, it's something coming in, as opposed to no, actually I am going to stick to my guns and I'm going to head down this direction. And I do see that a lot with people when I'm speaking to them, that they're being torn or pulled in different directions. And
you
it
have to have faith and confidence.
Well, and it's fair enough to question yourself as well. If you say, well, I thought I was heading over here to the right, I'm being pulled over here to the left. So the question is, do I want to go to the left, in which case I that's fine, or do I really want to go to the right and I need to? So it's asking yourself that question.
It's asking that question so you make an informed decision.
Exactly.
It could be that, well, I need the income, but it's not right, but I can do it temporarily, so I've got very clear goals.
I'm making hand gestures, not rude ones for anybody listening. They're little arrows.
But it's about that, having those goals, and I can see it linked in, so it's temporary. It's not, I'm going to end up drifting there.
Yes. So did you ever have any points in the business that you have felt that actually it's not working, or that you're not happy with it? So again, a lot of people I speak to, they go through these dips where things just aren't working and they feel all alone, and don't realize that everybody else has these problems.
The short answer is yes.
Share one.
Let me elaborate. So the first year I set up my business, because first of all I was like, oh yeah, it's going to be great, and they tell you can get these many coaching clients and marketing is going to be easy. It's not. And then, because what I'd done is I gave myself a year. It didn't work out. I was going to go back into engineering. In that year, my mom became really ill. And as a result of that, my business just sort of collapsed because I had no contingency plan. And of all things, and things I do all the time in the corporate world, I did not apply to my business. I didn't have my processes in place. I didn't have my contingency plan. I didn't have. So what happens here? I mean, I was working with associates. If I couldn't deliver, I'd already had associates who so the client wasn't let down. But it was the marketing. So that was my first lesson. Run it as a business, as in the way it should be run, with the right processes, almost like a project. So stuff I used to do in the corporate side. And then I won a couple of big contracts. Fantastic. And one of the contracts, it really was a steady earner, but it's a 3-year contract. And they decided to terminate it 2.5 years in, because the company who I was delivering for had merged with another company, and they decided to make some redundancies, and all the contracted staff went out, and I thought, okay, but fortunately I had other stuff coming in as well. But it was about, you don't stop looking what's the whole plan. So this is going to work this way. What's my contingency plan? What's my next project, and what have you? So, and to keep that diversity and that range and that steady workflow.
So kind of not all of your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. And then the challenge is, there's only me. Whereas, I had a PA when I was working in the engineering sector. Now I could do everything myself. As trivial as it sounds, even going to the post office to get something recorded delivery, it's half an hour out of your day, and time is precious. Yeah?
Yeah.
So it might be a 5-minute job, but parking, going there, then coming back, that half an hour, I could have made 4 more phone calls. So it's a balancing of time. But I've been very strict because my husband said from day one that if you want to do your own business, that's fine. But when the family's home, we are still a family. So it's not all hours of the day. So
Yes.
it's that discipline. So, and I'm like, I really want to be doing this. But no, he's right. He's right, because you do need that time to recharge as well. And I wasn't doing that in the first year, and I'm just,
Well, and you do get to a point where I think you do stop performing as well. And this is true whether it's your own business or whether you're in a job or whatever. If you're not taking that time out, you burn out.
Exactly.
At whatever level. It might be at a very, sort of low level burnout or the complete, full blown things. So that actually leads rather nicely, though, onto well-being, because again, one of the things we hear about a lot in the news now is about mental health, but also just generally about people having those challenges of being responsible for everything, being responsible for the business itself with or without extra support, but needing to balance that personal life, that self-care, as well as anybody else that's in your life. So how do you, apart from your husband drawing the line and saying, we will be a family?
I'm just thinking how to answer this. It comes down to that we're all individuals and we all have our own way of coping with things. One of the drivers for me to do what I'm doing is that I'm a Sikh by religion, and I can only talk about my own upbringing. And as Sikhs, the whole ethos of the Sikh religion is, what are you doing to serve others? And so part of if you've ever been to a Sikh place of worship called the Gurdwara, we have what's called the langar, where everybody participates in making the food that then everybody then shares.
Okay.
And what it signifies is that there's no caste system, there's no one higher or lower. We are all the same and we're all created equally. And one of the questions when we did sort of study religion is that you're on this earth for a short time. What are you doing with your time here? What's the legacy? It's not about materialistic things. It's about what have you done and what have you left behind? What have you done to create a better world? With that in mind, when I'm doing my work, it's not about, here's somebody who needs a bit of help. I genuinely want this person to be good about themselves because I believe everybody's got unlimited potential. And because my beliefs are so strong, when somebody actually moves forward, it makes it all worthwhile. And that almost like relieves my own anxiety pressure. There'll be times when I'm like, okay, so what's my number of clients this month? But to be honest, I haven't thought about it in years because I so trust the process that when a client does come, when something does happen, it happens for the right reasons. It's almost that spiritual belief. I now trust the process so much that it happened and it with the right people. And an element of that is, initially when I'll be taking on any type of client, any type of work, now I don't. Because now I just trust the process and it's all working out great. And to answer your question about anxiety and stress, because I now have that time out, I do a meditation, I do a bit of mindfulness, because it's part of recharging. And in that space, it's not because I'm anxious or I'm stressed, but it's a bit like going to the gym. When you do a bit of physical exercise, you feel good.
Yes.
Because we have the 4 quotients. We have emotional, physical, intelligent and spiritual. And we have to balance all 4. And if all 4 are in balance, you're unstoppable. It's usually when one is out of balance that anxiety sets in, or people start questioning, and it's usually lack of time for the other quotients.
Sorry, we just got distracted there for a moment because Woody decided that he needed Arpinder to rub his tummy. He made this very clear to her. So Woody is an expert at managing his well-being. As you can see, he decided it was time to have a tummy rub and insisted on having it. I think we
And it
could
worked.
learn from him. So, but I think you're right that, and I know for myself that I can tell. In general, I know myself that at the moment I'm out of balance, and I know the things that I'm doing to try and get back into balance. But I'm also in a much better place than I was in terms of being able to see that now and being able to see the repercussions. Whereas before I couldn't necessarily. I would know that something was wrong, but I wouldn't be able to link it all. So I
You have to be quite disciplined to take that time out to reflect.
Yes, and to stop and say, actually, I am going to do this. And I know in the last couple of weeks that I haven't. And that there are various things where actually, as you were just saying that, I was thinking, oh yeah, actually, I am missing doing my meditation. And I notice it. I noticed the distance that it gave me as well when I was having, if there was something challenging going on, that with the meditation, I had become much better at looking at that and observing it rather than being caught up in it. So it's interesting to hear.
Well, I think as humans, we've still got a long way to evolve. We've been so conditioned to be left-brain thinkers. Everything's got to be rational, which is like organisations talk about the emotional side. We want emotional leadership. We want authentic leadership. By the way, then they give you a definition of authentic leadership, and it comes back to the rational brain. And even like in schools, when they're talking about cutting the art and the music lessons, that has a big impact on anxiety in these children when they grow older. And we talk about depression and whatever, but you're cutting it's about balancing.
Yes. Well, and all of those things are, the number of people I think that, again, that I speak to that come out of corporate or whatever and suddenly discover that actually they've gone back to something that they used to do when they were younger, and they've realized that actually they are creative. They didn't think they were, but they've discovered this sort of little piece of it. Yeah, exactly.
They're happy. And it's not about, but when you're in, it's remember when we had the credit crunch? And I remember it was because it was the automotive industry first, and also the banks as well. And there was lots of news stories about how these sort of financial whiz kids, everything has crashed. And I remember there was one particular story. This guy said, all I ever wanted to do was build surfing boards. And he loves it. He says, the money's nowhere near, but he says the quality of my life is so much better because it's got it in balance for him. We get conditioned, we need money, we need it. What for?
And this is one of the things that I'm trying to do with these interviews as well, is to have people on who have defined their own success, and it may or may not be a success that is the popular or the known one. So you may not have ever heard of this person. So for example, no offense, but people aren't necessarily going to have heard of you if they haven't. But you are successful, and that for me is really important. That define your own success and what it means to you, and if making surfboards and having that lifestyle.
And because I think if you're happy, you have a positive impact on people around you, and it's the ripple effect. We're all connected in some way. If you make people around you, if you're stressed and you're anxious, people around you think, oh, I'm not sure. You pick up the energy of people around you.
That's it. As you say, it does ripple out. So, Arpinder, it's been really, really lovely speaking to you.
Thank you for the opportunity, Deborah.
No, thank you. So just before we wrap up, I'd like to know if you have two pieces of advice. One for somebody who is in a job, so somebody who's employed and who is maybe, has limiting beliefs and however they're feeling. So some advice to them to maybe just help them just take a step forward. And one to somebody who's running their own business, and who, just a piece of advice from your experience to help them with continuing to run their own business.
So if I start with the business one first.
Absolutely.
So someone who's running their own business, stick at it. If it feels right in your gut, you know it's right. And the reason I say stick at it is because people around you will give you good advice and say do this and do that. And if it doesn't feel right, you're going to start feeling anxious. No one is in a position to say what's right and what's wrong. Do it your way. And if you look at all the people who we talk about, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, they all did it their own way. Be that person.
That's true.
Okay? There's somebody who's in a corporate career, very similar. Challenge yourself as to why you're thinking what you're thinking. What has fueled that thought? And then challenge the evidence. So if you think, oh, I'm not quite sure if I can get that promotion, what's your evidence? Is it because somebody said something, or is it because you're seeing how other people are doing it? You know, my daughter has a phrase, be a flamingo amongst the pigeons. I think it's been bandied about. Be that somebody different, but in very much so, network. And by network, again, explore what's happening, have those conversations, build those relationships. And that applies to business as well. It's all about relationships. And then you get to, you know, and then in those relationships, you can have challenging conversations as well. So there you go.
That is wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I will put all of your contact details onto the show notes, so if anybody wants to get in touch with you, they will be able to as well.
Thank you.
So thank you again, Arpinder. With Dr. Arpinder Bansi of Core Value Associates Limited. That was our last interview of this season, and I'll be back in the new year with a brand new season and some exciting and different types of interviews and episodes for you, just to keep things moving and looking at things from different angles. So I hope that you have an absolutely wonderful Christmas if you're listening to this before the Christmas period, and I will see you in the new year. All of the details for Arpinder will be found on the show notes, but she can be found at Core Values, KAUR values.com. The number of people listening to podcasts is increasing year on year as people look to break free from their screen and consume information on the go. If you'd like to know more about podcasts, then please go to what'sthisIhear.bridginggaps.uk. Are you considering your own podcast? Why not check out So You Think You Want Your Own Podcast? It's an online course that introduces you to everything that's involved in hosting a podcast, as well as working with you to define your own podcast concept. You can get more information on it at startyourownpodcast.bridginggaps.uk. Bridging Gaps, the business podcast, was produced by Deborah Levitt of Bridge Road Consultants Limited, with original music provided by Pete Dineley.
You've been listening to Deborah Levitt on Bridging Gaps, the business podcast.